When I think back to my childhood, I can still picture my grandmother's kitchen. The warm smell of bread rising slowly in the oven, the sound of bubbling pots filled with hearty soups, and the gentle hum of her voice as she moved gracefully through the small but magical space. It was never just a kitchen to her. It was a sanctuary, a place where everyday ingredients transformed into something greater, where food was never simply about filling a plate, but about healing, strengthening, and reviving the spirit. For her, every spice had a story, every vegetable carried wisdom, and every recipe was born from love and necessity. She believed with a conviction that could not be shaken, that the body could be guided back into balance with the right touch of nature, that the earth provided what we needed if only we were humble enough to listen and learn. Among all her wisdom, what stood out most was what she always called her recipes for energy, and energy a phrase she repeated as if she wanted to remind us that vitality wasn't a luxury, but a daily birthright, and it could be nurtured with simple, intentional choices. She would say with a knowing smile that lit her whole face that fatigue was rarely just about being tired. It was the body's way of whispering that it needed help, that it was missing something essential, and that instead of rushing to find a quick fix in stimulants or pills, one should first return to nature, to roots, to the forgotten wisdom of old kitchens. And so she would share with us her simple but profound secrets, weaving them into our breakfasts and our conversations as though they were stories meant to be remembered forever. One of her most treasured remedies was something so simple that people often overlooked it: beetroot in morning juice for anemia and fatigue. She swore by it, not because she had read it in some medical journal or because a doctor had prescribed it, but because she had lived it, tested it, and seen it work again and again, both on herself and on those she loved. When we woke sluggish after long nights, when our bodies seemed heavy and our minds clouded, she would quietly bring out the deep red beets, their skin earthy and their flesh rich with a color that looked almost like blood itself. She would wash them carefully, peeling them with hands that moved with reverence, as if she was aware she was holding a medicine that carried the heartbeat of the soil. Into the blender they would go, sometimes with carrots, apples, a squeeze of lemon, and a touch of ginger, and soon the glass in front of us shimmered like a jewel, a ruby-red potion promising renewal. The first sip was always strong, earthy, almost startling to those unfamiliar with it, but beneath the soil-like taste came a sweetness, a grounding, a reminder of the richness of life itself. She would smile knowingly as we drank, reminding us that the beet was not only food but blood nourishment, iron for weary veins, energy for tired muscles, and clarity for foggy minds. She would tell us that in times past, when families had little access to expensive remedies, they turned to what was already in the garden, and it was often the simplest things, like a beet pulled from the soil at dawn, that made the greatest difference. As she told these stories, she also taught us that food should not only be taken with the mouth, but also with gratitude in the heart, because the act of eating was to her a sacred contract with the earth. Each recipe she created carried not only nutrients, but intention, and she believed intention had its own kind of energy, invisible yet powerful. That is why she never cooked in anger or prepared food in haste. She believed that the energy of the cook was just as important as the recipe itself. Through the years, I came to realize that my grandmother's recipes for energy were not just about beetroot or garlic, about herbs steeped in hot water or broths simmered until they glowed with nourishment. They were about a philosophy, a way of seeing food not as mere sustenance, but as an ally, a friend, a silent healer always available if one was wise enough to listen. She carried within her the quiet knowledge that vitality could be cultivated like a garden, and the human body, like soil, needed tending, balance, and replenishment. I remember a time when I was preparing for long exams, overwhelmed by sleepless nights and endless reading. my body drained of enthusiasm, and my mind unable to focus. It was my grandmother who noticed before I even confessed my exhaustion. She pulled me into the kitchen, her eyes glimmering with both seriousness and tenderness, and said, "You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot think from an empty body. Come, let me show you." She prepared once again that ruby-red juice this time, adding a slice of orange for brightness, telling me that when the blood was nourished, the mind became sharper, the spirit lighter, and the day more bearable. I drank it slowly, feeling both skeptical and hopeful, but as the hours passed, I could not deny that something within me shifted. The heaviness lifted just a little, and though I still had much work to do, my body seemed to remember that it was capable of carrying me through. Her wisdom extended beyond the physical into the emotional and spiritual realms. She insisted that food was not just for the body, but also for the soul, and that fatigue was not only about low iron or lack of sleep, but also about carrying burdens, thoughts, and worries that drained the heart. In those moments, she would make lighter meals, infused with herbs that calmed the nerves, teas that soothed the spirit, and laughter that filled the air like sunlight. For her, recipes for energy were never just about adding calories or boosting iron. They were about reminding the body and spirit that life could be joyful, that nourishment was both tangible and invisible. Over time, I began to see the genius of her philosophy. In a world where people often chase complicated diets, expensive supplements, and quick fixes, she taught me the power of simplicity. A beetroot in the morning, prepared with love and consumed with gratitude, could sometimes do more for anemia and fatigue than any pill, because it carried not only nutrients, but also the energy of care, of tradition, of connection to the earth. I often wonder how many of us have lost that connection. How many kitchens no longer carry the quiet hum of intention? How many people eat without ever considering the deeper story behind their meals? My grandmother, with her gentle insistence and her tireless devotion, kept that story alive for us. And in doing so, she gave us more than recipes. She gave us a way of seeing life itself. Even now, years later, when life feels overwhelming and fatigue creeps in, I return to her wisdom. I stand in my own kitchen, peeling the rough skin of a beet, listening to the blender churn its deep melody, and pouring into a glass that same jewel-colored liquid that once restored me as a child. And as I drink, I hear her voice. Remember, vitality is a choice you make every day. The earth gives freely, but you must be willing to receive. Her recipes for energy and energy were never written in a book, never measured with precision, and yet they live on as vividly as if they were etched into stone. They were passed down through stories, through gestures, through the act of caring for others with food, and in that transmission lies their true power. For recipes written on paper may fade, but recipes lived in memory and embodied in daily practice never die.